It's been a few weeks since I last reviewed a book, so thank you ever so much for sticking with me through what ended up being a 2-week reading slump. But I am back. I have been reading some truly wonderful books and a few clunkers, and I really have just turned a page in my most recent read. Wow, it has been a long time since I said that actual line. Believe it or not, well, you'll kind of believe it because you've got access to a calendar too. It's now April. Easter is just a couple of weeks away, and I spent yesterday, as I record this, sitting in a pub garden enjoying a well-deserved G&T. Anyway, you're not here to listen to me pondering the recent past. You want to hear me talking about a book, right? That's why you're here, isn't it? Here I am, no spoilers, as opinion-filled as ever and ready to roll. All of which means it's time for the latest episode of Being Bookish. This week I am visiting Tobago, Chicago, a future Earth where humans are a thing of history, and the mind of an incredibly creative writer in Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. And before we get into it, I am going to say I promise to do my utmost not to desecrate the names of our characters because they are beautiful, but my pronunciation sucks. I'm your host Ray, self-confessed bookworm, introvert, hermit, and long-term depression sufferer. Join me on my journey through my ever-growing to-be-read pile and enjoy the latest of my 100% spoiler-free book reviews. My determination to continue reading different genres rather than just focusing on one, kind of like last year, I signed up for a Lumicrate Starbright subscription. I was lucky enough to get off the shortlist before the boxes started sending out, and that this book has a stunning dust jacket and hardcover may well have encouraged me to pull it off the shelf, but the story is what kept me reading. This is actually my second science fiction read of the year, but when you hear the story, you'll realise it is far more than that. The future of storytelling is here. Life has thrown Zelu some curveballs over the years, but when she's suddenly dropped from her university job and her latest novel is rejected, all in the middle of her sister's wedding, her life is upended. Disabled, unemployed, and from a nosy, high-achieving, judgmental family, she's not sure what comes next. In her hotel room that night, she takes the risk that will define her life. She decides to write a book very unlike her others, a science fiction drama about androids and AI after the extinction of humanity, and everything changes. What follows is a tale of love and loss, fame and infamy, of extraordinary events in one world and another. And as Zelu's life evolves, the lines between fiction and reality begin to blur, because sometimes a story really does have the power to reshape the world. This book was my second read after the slump that luckily only lasted a fortnight. The first was The Incredible Theft by Abdul Razak Gurna. And after finishing this one, I felt as though I had hit reset on my need to read because I ended the month having finished 12 books, the same as I'd done in January and February when I hadn't suffered any blips at all. Anyway, Zelu is a Nigerian American writer in her late 30s, living in the suburbs of Chicago. She has always been a bit of a rebel, and sometimes her need to speak out can get her into trouble. While she is in Tobago to attend the wedding of her younger sister, Amarachi, she is not only fired from her role as an adjunct professor of literature, but receives the last in a series of rejections for a novel she has been working on. Feeling frustrated and understandably angry at these two obstacles that have been presented to her, she sits in her hotel room and starts to write something unlike any other work she has written before. It is while she is suffering anger, frustration, and hurt that she creates Rusted Robots. Her Nigerian immigrant parents see her as the odd one out among her 5 siblings. They do everything they can to protect her, an act which often frustrates when she sees how differently her other siblings are treated. She understands that they are concerned, but that doesn't make their overprotective attitude any less irritating. For Zelu, everything feels like failure. While in Tobago, she meets Mzizi, a cousin of Amarachi's groom. They bond immediately, and though their conversation is brief, this bond continues to build and get stronger throughout the story. In fact, it's a core part of the plot. After she returns to Chicago, Zelu stays in her apartment until she has no choice but to move back in with her parents, though it is not the path she wanted to take. While she is looking for a new job, she continues to hide in her childhood bedroom, writing more about the Hume robot Ankara and Ijeli, her AI companion, as they wander through a futuristic Nigeria no longer inhabited by humans. With her book suddenly finished, Zelu shares the manuscript with Mzizi, and he is not only effusive about it, but tells her that he couldn't put it down. On his urging, she sends it to her agent, who surprises her with quick feedback. Surprising because they've kind of been ignoring her because of the disaster of her previous books. It's a very different story to the ones she has previously submitted. This is the one that is going to make her a household name. This book that Zelu didn't expect to go anywhere explodes, encouraging a multi-figure bidding war between publishers. This is incredible for a book that Zelu wrote in anger and frustration at the situation she found herself in, and especially as it was a book she never expected to share with anyone. The book explodes, and almost overnight, Zelu is a success with fans all over the world reaching out to her, loving the characters she created. Many critics hail it a masterpiece, though there are some detractors, as there always are. Zelu is proud to be able to tell her family that this novel she produced is a success, though they don't appear to be as proud of her achievement as perhaps she expected them to be. Her mother, especially, is disappointed that her daughter hasn't sought the same path as her siblings. Within months, it appears that Rusted Robots is not only a success in the book charts, but is now also destined for the big screen with a Hollywood adaptation in production. Unfortunately, Zelu soon discovers that fame comes with its own problems, and while she now has enough money to move out of the family home and get a new place where she has space and independence, she also has to put up with the haters and the criticism that earlier wasn't something she had to actually deal with at all. It's at the point where she's found fame and is more comfortable in her own skin that her relationship with Nzizi shifts from that of close friends to a couple who are romantically entwined. Initially, Zulu is hesitant. Mzizi is younger and far more driven than she is, working hard to get his social media management app, Yibu, off the ground. And this particular app plays an important part in the way that she maintains her mental health when her fame starts to become far more difficult to cope with. At the same time as she's coping with her change in status and a new relationship, Zelu is offered a revolutionary medical procedure, a chance to walk again using experimental robotic exoskeleton legs developed by Dr. Hugo Wagner at MIT. For Zelu, this isn't about fixing her disability, it's about freedom. But her family doesn't see it that way. They question her motives, worrying that she's rejecting her identity, though they will never understand how she feels about what she sees as her own limitation. Their doubts are personal, deeply rooted in their beliefs, and prove painful for Zelu. Understandably, Zelu is heartbroken to discover that in order to make it more accessible to a wider audience, according to the studios at least, the movie adaptation of Rusted Robots has been changed. Her complex Nigerian characters Ankara and Ijeli have been whitewashed and become Yankee and Dot, much to her horror. The beauty that she created is no longer recognisable. Worst of all, her voice, which was the heart of the story, has been erased. After a particularly disastrous interview in which she is accused of wasting an opportunity to become a spokesperson for the differently abled, the internet turns on her. Her once adoring fans accuse her of being ungrateful. They cancel her. The very people who celebrated her now treat her like a villain. Zelu finds herself at a crossroads, pulled between her rising career and her private self, between disability, pride, and her own desire for change, between family loyalty and personal independence. As she is experiencing a difficult time personally and professionally, her world and that of her family is about to come crashing down about her ears with the sudden death of her father, Secret. Time seems to fly in the book at this point. In the background is the film, Zelu's cancellation by her fans, and her relationship with Nzizi. And before we know it, 2 years has passed. Her family have been travelling to visit Secret's resting place, but Zelu has been excluded because her fame and press notoriety make her a target for the criminal element. Frustrated at this exclusion and ignoring the advice of her loved ones, on the second anniversary of her father's death, she makes the decision to travel to Nigeria to visit her father's grave. She travels with Hugh, Uchenna, and Marcy, having grown close to them during her stay at MIT when she was getting her exoskeleton. While there, she is nearly kidnapped. Her status as a celebrity and her physical vulnerability make her a target. It's a terrifying moment that throws everything into perspective: her fame, her body, her place in the world. It is this moment that solidifies her view of her place. She is fully aware that were it not for her exoskeleton, she would no doubt be dead. However, her family sees her rebellious actions as the cause for her terrifying near-death experience. Throughout the novel, we don't just hear Zelu's voice, we also get perspectives from her family members through interview-style chapters. Her mother, her siblings, and others give their take on her choices, her struggles, and her triumphs. We also see excerpts from Rusted Robots, drawing a clear parallel between Zelu's fictional creations and her real-life challenges. I could go on for hours about the story. There is so much that goes on, but to do that would spoil everything for you and make it completely pointless in reading the book. And I think that it's one of those stories that maybe if you are interested, you should definitely pick up. I hope that this has given you just enough information to make you want to pick this book up, if it is a genre and a story you think you're going to enjoy. I'm not here to influence you. I never have been. I just want to give you a rundown of the books I've read and eventually my personal opinion of them. I always try and provide a balanced perspective, hence reading through sometimes hundreds of reviews from other readers across multiple platforms to keep things fair. Because my opinion and others are just that, they're personal. What I love, others may find awful, and what I dislike may be the favourite book of you or someone you know. I have read a number of books that I really didn't enjoy. I've given them 1 or 2 stars, only to see that they are rated more than 4 stars overall on sites like Goodreads and Storygraph. Bride, for example. So now I've given you a rundown of the core of the story without spoilers. What did other readers think of it? Kristen gave the book 2 stars because she was able to refrain from throwing her Kindle. I couldn't believe what I was reading for a second upon reading it. She said, I have a lot of thoughts about this book. Unfortunately, most of them are not positive. I want to say it's me and not the book, but I actually don't think it was in this case. As always, my complaints are made from a full awareness that I could not have done better. I still have full respect for anyone dedicated enough to complete a story, and Okorafor has completed many. As for this particular story, there was jarring repetition and a lot of discordant dialogue and plotting choices. The characters didn't feel internally consistent. There was so much that just hit wrong that I could never get invested. Even the portrayal of the publishing industry was confusingly off-kilter. A debut author getting multi-million-dollar contracts for a genre they've never written in or even liked. Plus, the science in the sci-fi part of the book was an absolute mess. Sure, sci-fi is all about stretching to the future of what could be, But there are some pretty fundamental laws you can't break, and the fact that these parts were the book that supposedly got the character this worldwide renown, sci-fi stories generally don't sell that wildly, period, and their fans are often pedantic nitpickers. Yes, I do recognise that I'm holding a mirror in the middle of this rant. The book within a book never would have made that kind of impact. The whole thing would have been better if we didn't actually get to read the novel at the centre of the plot, because it did not live up to its hype within the story. I wish those were all of the things that annoyed me. Unfortunately, there was a lot more. Just ask the friend I ranted to while I read this. It gets a 2 because I didn't actually throw my Kindle.
Yes, I had to go to the 2-star reviews in order to find a review I could use. Some were skipped because they contained multiple spoiler warnings, others because they were so extensive I just didn't want to overwhelm anyone, including myself. And the final group that I had to move on from was the small number of DNF reviews that still gave it a 1-star rating. You know how I feel about those. If I DNF the book, it gets a review detailing that I DNF'd and why, but no rating because personally, I don't like to rate something I couldn't sit through. Of course, everyone is entitled to review how they want, but I find it tough to justify a rating when you haven't finished. I do wonder if that's why I actually suck at DNFing books on the regular, which is kind of annoying. On Goodreads, the overall rating for the book is 4.09, and on Storygraph, it's a fair bit higher at 4.24. I have to admit that I was surprised the book didn't merit a higher score on Goodreads, especially given the nature of the more complimentary reviews on the platform. Death of the Author was released on January the 16th in the US and UK, with the special edition from Illumicrate released as part of their first Starbright box in February. As I write this script, the book has 4,824 ratings and 1,303 full reviews on Goodreads and 1,324 reviews on Storygraph. This gave me a fantastic pool to pull from, and though it's not as big a release as books like Fourth Wing, Deep End, or Say You'll Remember Me, all of which have garnered reviews in the tens of thousands within weeks of their publication, it's doing pretty well given it's more of a niche book. Mallory really enjoyed Death of the Author, having read an advanced copy of the book. She gave it 5 stars, saying,
I did not go in with any expectations except for knowing that people love her character building and writing, and they are right. Death of the Author is a science fiction novel with the perfect amount of literary fiction stroke dysfunctional family mixed in. Zelu is the second oldest of a Nigerian family living in Chicago who had an accident at the age of 12 that left her a paraplegic. The story starts when Zelu is around 30 years of age, and we follow her for over 10 years as she loses a job, deals with a family that wants to cushion her for safety, and as she publishes her first book. Okorafor splices in bits of the book that Zelu publishes in between plot and interviews with Zelu's family. It was the perfect amount of a book within a book for me. These splices made the book, which is more of a contemporary or literary fiction, have more of a speculative fiction feel, as Zelu's novel centres around robots and AI set in Nigeria. To me, the centre of this novel is the question of what does humanity mean? Okorafor draws the line between humanity and automation as we follow both Zelu and her sci-fi novel. I would be remiss if I did not mention that Zelu is not the perfect character. There will be times when the reader does not like her, but more often than not you will be rooting for her as she tackles the boundaries around her that have been set by her family, tradition, and society. As she adds automation to her life, her family just does not understand, and she feels misunderstood. If I have one qualm about the book, it's that the pacing is off at times when switching between following Zelu, going to her book, and going to an interview with a family member. This is a journey with themes of humanity, family, culture, grief, anxiety, depression, and the pressure to be as successful as your siblings. This is a journey I highly suggest you take on.
Now I've told you about other people's views. Let's get down to it. Here are my thoughts on Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. Completely spoiler-free and 100% honest. Did I like the book? I was admittedly surprised at how much I enjoyed this read. I had never read anything by Okorafor before getting this book in my Starbright box, but I am happy I did. I have read several so-called high sci-fi novels before, and while there's no denying they are very well written, for the most part they are not truly my genre. I've also read and enjoyed the more comedic offerings, including Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and a few novels by Tom Holt, and of course what I would consider less hardcore YA science fiction, including The Illuminae Files and Aurora Cycle by Kaufman and Christoph, which I could happily read multiple times over. Death of the Author is a bit of an odd one. I wouldn't define this specifically as science fiction. Does it have some plot points that could be considered sci-fi? Absolutely. The talk of space travel, the fact that Zelu is fitted with an exoskeleton that gives her the ability to walk after decades of being in a wheelchair. The exoskeleton isn't some futuristic cure. It is simply doing the job that her legs are no longer capable of doing. There are elements of the plot that give the story a somewhat futuristic feel, including Mzizi's social media filtering app, Yebu. I have to be honest, this particular app is one that I feel we could all do with. A tool to help us manage the posts and messages we see. Instead of taking away control and completely protecting the user from the truth, it informs you what is happening and gives you the chance to make a decision whether you want to see it or not. Sort of like a filter that actually works properly, something most of our social media could do with. I have not always been a fan of the story within a story concept. There have been a few books I've read that I've really wanted to just put down and never pick up again. And sometimes I find it can be a little bit overwhelming. Multiple plots, multiple characters, different storylines, and two separate conclusions. While many people, judging from reviews, felt this element was misleading, as one part of the plot was Zelu's science fiction story Rusted Robots, while the other was her life, I found personally it was well balanced. At least I felt it was. I wanted to learn what she had written, and though I didn't find Rusted Robots to be a book I could see myself reading if it were the complete story, I could see why Zelu was so attached to her creation and how her readers managed to connect to the story she was telling, though as per the first review, I don't understand why it actually sort of built up such a massive bidding war. I think it's fair to say that Death of the Author is a deeply layered story. It's not only about Zelu and how she does or doesn't change as her life seems to soar out of control. It's also about the costs of creative success. It's about how public celebration can turn into rejection, family and culture, disability and choice, and who gets to define the narrative of your life. It's also about surviving all of that and coming out the other side, still determined to chase your dreams. Zelu definitely has dreams, and even though she had to change the direction her life went in when she fell out of a rotting tree at the age of 12, these dreams have always been under the surface, waiting to bubble free. Rusted Robot gives her the chance to seek out these wishes, and, in some cases at least, make them come true. Many have spoken about her family. Some reviews see them as cruel, overbearing, judgmental. Others have said very much the same about Zelu. It's a very difficult thing to be the different one, the person everyone smothers or keeps secrets from. Zelu, to a degree, excludes herself from her family. She pushes them away when they don't automatically approve of her decisions, seeing her choices as selfish. Is she making choices about herself? Yes. But there is also that lack of awareness that some of her choices will impact other people. The perfect example of doing things for her own selfish reasons is the moment she decides to ignore family advice and head off to Nigeria to visit her father's grave. The moment she is almost abducted at gunpoint when she is on her way to the airport after a relatively uneventful trip is exactly what her mother and siblings were trying to save her from. At that moment, not only was she risking her own life, but the lives of the people she was with. Is it selfish to want to visit the final resting place of a loved one? Not at all. But it feels like she was trying to make a point more than show her father any respect. Because there's no doubt he would not have wanted her to put her life at risk to visit his grave. Because, well, I mean, the person is gone and their spirit is with you, whatever. Zelu is a frustrating character. I spent half of the book feeling happy for her as she achieves her dreams with the book, gets closer to Mzizi, and finds her independence after suffering a series of setbacks. But then I spent the rest of it feeling frustrated as she set herself on a clear path to self-destruction. She made selfish decision after selfish decision, uncaring of who else may suffer the consequences of her choices. I understand the need to stand up for yourself when you see things as being unfair, but she starts to do things in a way that feels as though she is purposely being spiteful, angry at the people who, yes, to a degree, do speak down to her, occasionally making decisions on her behalf. But being honest, that's kind of what family is all about. They have grown used to making decisions to ensure that she is safe and that she won't be hurt. And sometimes these may seem somewhat overbearing, but their hearts are in the right place. Zelu does come across in these moments as though she hasn't grown up. She's rebelling against the people who love her and flinging their feelings for her in their faces. And yes, it is irritating. Despite this, I could not stop reading. I know that the way the book was written, half literary fiction and half low-level science fiction, is not going to be to everyone's taste. And there are other complaints too. Not mine necessarily, actually not mine at all. Some of the lower rated reviews accuse the book of being ableist because of an opportunity Zelu is offered and the choices she makes. Zelu lives with a disability and the book does not reduce her to just this part of who she is, but it also doesn't ignore it. Her decision to try the robotic exoskeleton legs isn't framed as fixing herself, but rather reclaiming agency. Okorafor confronts how society often views disability as something tragic or to be cured, and instead centres Zelu's autonomy in defining her own body and future. This is further enforced when she is confronted rather angrily by that journalist, accusing her of wasting an opportunity to positively represent the differently abled rather than seeking a treatment that the majority wouldn't be able to afford. This assumption that she would market herself as someone to represent others is unfair and somewhat combative, yet Zelu is the one who comes out of the experience with a negative reputation. Anyway, less about that and back to my view of the story. I did enjoy it. I felt that it was written in a way that kept the right balance between Zelu's rusted robots and the story of Zelu and her life and experiences. The fact that I was not a huge fan of Zelu and many of the decisions she made is neither here nor there. I don't feel you have to necessarily like the main protagonist in a novel to enjoy the story. Just look at Yellowface by Rebecca Kwang, an entire cast of rather unpleasant people with questionable motivations, in a novel that was actually one of my favourites of 2023. If you're looking for something like this or you loved this and want something else, then maybe you should add these to your reading list. This is a tough one. As I've already mentioned, I don't think that this is science fiction in a traditional sense, a point that is highlighted by a number of dissatisfied reviewers who were expecting something else. Trust me, I am not among them. If you're looking for full-on science fiction, then I personally would recommend the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson and Project Hail Mary or The Martian by Andy Weir. If you want something that is still science fiction but more focused on the young adult characters, then I have to recommend the Aurora Cycle by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This rather chunky trilogy is fantastic, and I have reviewed the first book in the series and I will post the link below. I don't think it gets anywhere near as much credit as it probably should. A book I have yet to read but is on my TBR for 2025 is by the late and great Ursula K. Le Guin. Though mostly known for her speculative science fiction series, The Hainish Cycle, the book I was convinced to pick up is a prize-winning 1972 novel, The Lathe of Heaven. Have you read any of these? Do you think I got my recommendations right? I am sure that I have left many great books off this list, but I can only honestly recommend books that I have read or purchased to read. And my shelves are kind of short when it comes to science fiction. Did I miss anything off the list that you love? And if so, what would you recommend if someone asked you for a science fiction recommendation? We're more than a quarter into 2025. So, how are things going? In fact, at the end of this month, we'll be a third of the way through 2025. Time is definitely passing by incredibly quickly, but I have to be honest and say that I'm relieved we are now in the throes of spring. As I look out the window, it is gloriously blue skies and the temperatures are hitting the high teens and low 20s, at least where I am right now. With the warmer weather come late afternoon spent sitting on my balcony with a new book and a cup of tea, and I am really looking forward to it. This last few days have been spectacular. This month is something of a quiet one when it comes to my pre-orders, with just one for the whole of April. I know that what is your Roman Empire was the question on everyone's lips last year. Well, this pre-order seems to be answering it for many fantasy readers. Roman Empire plus Dragons and Magic equals Firebird by Juliet Cross. So far this year, I have read a grand total of 37 books. I'm currently on books 38 and 39, and I haven't stuck to a single genre. On my read shelf are books in fantasy, mystery, crime, science fiction, and romance. And right now, I am reading a cozy mystery sequel and another novel that I am struggling currently to define, though I am enjoying it. Do you have any interesting books on your TBR for the rest of 2025 that you want to share? Are there any books that you're really looking forward to you'd love to hear me talk about? Or are you on a ban and working your way through your existing shelves? I'd love to find out what you're reading and what you're enjoying the most. Well, that's it for this week, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, why not share it with your friends and family? And please post a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other podcatchers where you might listen. It really does help. You can follow me on Instagram as beingbookish.pod and on X as being_bookish. In the last few weeks, you may have noticed I've actually made a return to TikTok. I have no idea what happened, but after over a year of not posting anything, I have been more regularly putting up content. You can find me there as Being Bookish Reviews. You can also find many of these later episodes and some video content, though I'm thinking about moving away from there, and that's on YouTube, where I am Ray Loves Reading, which can be found using the tag @BeingBookishPod. Or, of course, if you prefer to read everything, as many readers do, you can find some spoiler-free reviews and my 2025 reading tracker, plus all the links to my podcast on the website beingbookish.co.uk. Until next time, this is me saying farewell.